Welcome back. So this is the recap of the stream we did last week for the Extremely Open Science project. And my goal is just to go over what we observed. We didn't make a lot of progress in the main project, but I think that was a very important point that for me was a very important detail that I actually had missed before. But potentially we will be able to use it in the future. So let's just bring everybody up to speed. So we've been playing with this idea of, can we use an excess of small genes as a way of measuring genome quality? So if a genome has too many small genes, that's probably not good. That probably is an indication that some of these are being interrupted by fake or errors in the reads. So this particularly happens a lot happens a lot more with genomes from Oxford Nanopore data, which we're big fans of. We've been really having great results with it, but we do need to do QC. QC is very important, right? So let me just start sharing my screen, and today I actually won't go through the code. The code is not particular. So let me just show you a plot that we had seen before. So this is the plot we've been looking at for the last several weeks, and so in this plot, so in the x-axis is the number of mutations, again everything done by simulation. So we start at 0. This is a genome that we've gotten from ProGenomes, so supposedly very good genome, and then we add mutations, and then as we add mutations, the number of, so these are the sort of the full lines, the number of these sum of z scores below -4, so this is our excess of small genes, it goes down, whereas the dashed lines, they just represent the values, they just at the 0 point. So ideally all of the dashed lines would be up here, and then all of the contiguous lines, they would go down, and we would be able to find the threshold there. And so this is what we looked at 2 weeks ago, where if we threshold, if we threshold right here, and say that everything below this is a bad genome, then then we have a lot of false positives. We'll be calling a lot of, and then as we move this threshold, say here, we still have this handful of 4 false positives. This is more or less this range here, but we are not, anything below it will already be, except for these 4, we have very few false negatives. So we're mostly catching everything, and if we have a threshold that's too low, then then even even genomes where we've added 5,000 mutations, they would still not be caught. So, so this is already quite good. But what we've been trying to do this last couple of weeks now is, okay, can we maybe identify properties of these genomes here that would allow us to already say, okay, these are weird. And so the first thing I thought about was, okay, maybe there's something about gene density, coding density. Maybe they're very optimized genomes. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to plot the coding density as a function of the number of mutations. So again, the same x-axis here. So this is the number of mutations, and this is the coding density from 0 to 1. And then in dark, so the darker lines, the black lines, these are these outliers. And actually I expected the outliers to start up here. Since they have a lot of small genes, maybe the theory was maybe they would be very optimized. And no, if anything, maybe they're on the lower end, but still they're not clear outliers. And so this was not, it's all, you have to explore these, these things. And actually there's this sort of rationalist adjacent thought discussion about optimism and being, there's this idea that there's some value to being irrationally optimistic, where you have to be, because if you're realistic about your chances of success, you will never do anything, because you'll be, this only has a small chance of success, so I'm not going to do it. So being irrationally optimistic is rational. I frankly this is a bit too clever by half. I think the much better approach is to start being excited about trying things that are probably going to fail. So I think in science it's always good to have this perspective of, okay, this is probably going to fail, but it's worthwhile trying anyway. So this didn't work, but there were these things here go up and down, and then I had already noticed on this this drop here. So a single 20, so these are 25 mutations added to and then suddenly there's a huge drop. So these two genomes, the genome that's here and the genome that's there, really should be almost identical except for 25 base pairs. So what was going on here? And I spent a bit of time looking at this, looking at we looked at the genomes, we looked at the comparison, and that really didn't make sense that there was been this big drop. And then so we've been looking at everything we're doing for is based on the CheckM2 results the CheckM2 gene calls. So we looked at how CheckM2 calls the genes, and I think this is maybe another lesson that I think is important for people to have is if you're working in this space, most of the software you're using is also open source, so you can go and check their code as well. So everything can be transparent to you, with more or less. And so looking at what CheckM2 does, is it runs Prodigal twice. It runs it with the translation table 11 and then with translation table 4. So 11 being the normal, or the most commonly used, and 4 being used by a couple of weird bugs like Mycobacterium. And then it uses this rule, this heuristic, whereas if the density of 4 is higher than 11, at least 5 percentage points, and at least 0.7, and this is a bit of then we use 4 instead of 11. Otherwise, we use 11. And so this is a heuristic, and actually I asked Alexei about it, so the first author of CheckM2, and what he told me was that this is actually the same heuristic that GTTP-TK uses, and so in some ways he also just inherited this heuristic, and yes, it seems to give pretty good results as you'd expect, and picks up things like Mycobacterium tuberculosis, where but it is a heuristic. And so what's happening here is that this organism, actually I think these two organisms, they use table 4 until they cross this threshold, and once you cross the threshold, it flips over to 11. And then the big difference between 4 and 11 is that one of the stop codes for tryptophan in 4 and 11, and for stop in 11. I think I'm right about this, but Wikipedia is obviously your friend. And so what's happening is we're just above the threshold here and just below the threshold there, and so we have this here, and then this here too is, as we add mutations, we can just be hugging the threshold, and then we just get these weird effects there. Right, and so and some of these things that we see here, these big drops, this is a change in the heuristic. Right, so we ran out of time, but first of all, I'm very happy because I don't like it when there's these weird features of the data. I think it's great to follow up on them, and often you learn a lot by following, trying to really trace. I say, ideally you should be always able to trace. If you have an ATC in your data, trace that all the way through the pipeline. And so we hear these weird features. It's good to know what's going on. So we know what's going on. Also interesting that if coding table 4, these organisms, they have coding table 4. So maybe that could be itself something to explore in the future. That could be itself a marker of these organisms are weird. So maybe if we're doing a tool out of this. We could say, okay, it works really well, except if your organism uses coding table 4, all bets are off. Please don't use our tool. And that would still be great because it would catch most cases, right? We would catch if we can do well for 99% of cases and identify the 1% where things not work. I think that would be very good. So we made a lot of progress, even though in the end, nothing changes in the code. Is knowledgeable. But the other thing I wanted to point out is the next couple of weeks are actually going to be a little bit different, because instead of pursuing the main thread of the Sardine Extremely Open Science project, I'm going to be doing live coding, but I'm going to be doing something that's related, which is I'm going to be looking at some mags that we got. So these are the original mags from Ana Cruzco's project from the dog gut microbiomes, and I'm going to go back to those and analyze their quality using CheckM2. So this will be a little bit more generic, but so it's a sub project within the broader Sardine project. But I think the same principle. I'll be doing everything here, or everything streamed. It will be on Zoom. So there's a form. I'll put this also in the show notes. I think you can still register. But see you there. Everything for Sardine is always on the mailing list and and on GitHub. So sign up on YouTube. I think tomorrow I won't be able to stream on YouTube, so this will be Zoom slightly, but everything will still be public, and then I'll post on YouTube, sort of this recap, and then eventually this sub project will also be merged with Sardine. All right, so be well and talk to you soon, and